Yo, what's up, my brother?
What is up, my friend? Did we vibe into some new intro music today?
Yes, sir. It's my jam.
We're changing it up a little bit.
I'm glad you like it.
I do like it. And hopefully our listeners like it as well, which, by the way, welcome to the Pixelists podcast, where we talk about all the amazing games, movies, shows, things that we really like and adore. And we jump on a couple of microphones and talk about it on a week-to-week basis. So I am, I almost said I'm Will. I'm not Will. You're Will.
And I'm not Blake.
Yes, correct. I'm Blake. That's Will. We are the Pixelists. And we'd like to think that maybe you're also part of the Pixelists family, enjoying these shows just like we do. Yeah, one cohesive unit.
That's right.
Dom would be proud. Family. It's all that matters. But yeah, we're just a couple of nerds who love talking about stuff that we really enjoy watching. And today's episode, we're talking about a favorite of both of ours. It's Critical Role show Exandria Unlimited. And if you're checking this out, hopefully you've been watching some of it with us. And we're talking about episode 4. It started
right?
like running. It is 4.
Yeah.
I was like, it's 4. Then all of a sudden I was like, oh God, is it 4 or is it 3? Okay, yeah, 4. So we're halfway done with the series. We know there's going to be 8 episodes total. And we're going to be deep diving on it today, trying to basically hit every detail as best we can on this episode that Will, did you enjoy the episode, by the way?
I did. It was a treat. I've really liked, we already talked about it, but how I think we both said last episode was our favorite so far. I think we're continuing to go on an upward trajectory. We similar to last ep, we didn't get too much combat. There was some, but it was another heavy RP episode, which I just eat those up. So yeah, I did enjoy it. How about you?
I did not enjoy it for 3 words, Will. Cinna was robbed.
True,
that's all I have to say.
True.
Liam O'Brien's performance was so amazing. The fact we're just gonna go ahead. I mean, we'll get to the recap, all that stuff here in a second, but I got to get this out because it's made me angry. Will, I've lost sleep over this. The performance was amazing. The crowd loved him or loved her, and not even runner up. What is this crap? That's what I want to know.
Yeah,
so
it was rigged.
That was the only thing that really threw me. I was like, Abria, how dare you? How dare you do this to us after giving us someone we love so much and then taking it away from us? So.
True, though. We'll expound on that more later. But yeah, I actually agree.
Yeah. Other than that, oh my gosh, this was prime D&D in my mind. Like you said, we really liked the last episode. It really does feel like it's like everyone's style and energy is really starting to vibe with one another. They're really starting to be comfortable with one another. And this is everything you could want in a D&D session. You have some really awesome combat. You have a lot of questions that make you wonder, like, where's this story going? You have a great RP sesh in the form of the pageant. When I think about all the elements you want in a great D&D session, this pretty much had it. And so I love the episode. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was the best one yet. And I know we try to stay away from some of the more also engaged communities that can be somewhat negative. But actually, a lot of the comments that I was reading were that many other people were saying, yeah, this was a freaking phenomenal episode. Nice. Props to the CR fam, because it seems like a lot of us enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I actually haven't seen too much commentary on it like I normally would. So it's good to hear that most everybody enjoyed it, because there's always a few people, but
there's always that one person who cannot enjoy anything in life.
Exactly.
So
but, yeah, grade up and officially the halfway point. So be interesting to see what happens from here on out.
There's a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I guess we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But if you're familiar with us, if you're familiar with these, then we like to give a bit of an in-depth recap, since this is very long content, a lot to trudge through, and a lot that you can easily forget week to week. So, as usual, we're gonna do our in-depth recap now. But if you, I think I just said this, but if you watch us, you're familiar with this. We sometimes cut this out and upload it, for the convenience. So if you're watching that video now, awesome, thank you. And you can find our full discussion video. We'll link that below in the comments. So check it out if you're into EXU and nerds diving way too deep into it.
For sure. For sure. And also we sometimes stream these. So check out our Twitch channel, because sometimes we stream it. And if you want to like be part of the conversation, we love interacting with people in the room. And you have your own insights, things that you loved, put it in the comments of the video, but definitely jump into those streams and let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, we should look into streaming directly to the YouTube channel, because that would probably be the best place to do it, honestly. But I guess this is shop talk for later, but just thought of it, so figured I'd throw it out there so I didn't forget. Anyway.
Now that we've kind of rambled a little bit, maybe we should say again, hey, thanks for checking out the recap. We're about to talk about the episode, and if you want to see the whole video, click the link below. See, now people are like, okay, yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it. So,
okay.
All right, so, let's do this thing.
We'll jump in. Episode 4 of Exandria Unlimited, By the Road. All right. So we start off, the end of last episode had our whole party just riding away in the cart after having just bested Posca, and they are now on their way to the ruins of Conera. I think that's how you say it, Quinceañera. And since our cart driver was unfortunately maybe killed last episode, the party is now in control of this cart, and so they're just going to take it the whole way now, where previously they were just taking it to the edge of the city. But anyway, so we're in our cart on the way, and the episode hilariously just starts with Fern trying to control the cart and unfortunately rolling a natural 1 on her animal handling check, and the cart just literally comes to a stop. And Dariax is like, all right, I'll help here, and he uses Thaumaturgy to cast Thunderclap and just scare the bejesus out of the horses, which it does. And in this happening, Fern actually falls off the cart from not being able to hold on. And basically we just have this quick scene of just some hijinks of everyone trying to fix this problem, but not being able to. Like, Dorian tries to cast Levitate on Fern and like drag her along with the cart, but unfortunately Levitate does not like tether you to the person, so all he does is lift her up, and she's just where she was, but now floating. So, it's a bunch of chaos, and finally somebody's like, just pull on the reins. And so Dariax tries that, but also fails. And ultimately we just have Aurum leap into action, just kind of like nimbly jumps onto the horse, covers its eyes, and that horse is able to calm down, slow down. But the other one, unfortunately, is not. So the cart jeers off the path and eventually comes to a stop. And everybody gets back together, and they're like, okay, what are we doing? And they realize that the Gilmore cart they have is actually leaving a trail of glitter behind them. And so like, okay, we're like running from a bunch of people. This maybe isn't the best trail to be leaving behind. They do come to realize, though, that if you wait long enough, the glitter will disappear. But they're not one to take any chances. And so the cart, which they have deemed the glitter shitter, they come up with a diaper for it. And Dorian uses his cape to kind of capture the glitter so that they're leaving absolutely no trail. So after all these hijinks, they get back on, and they get back on the road. And here we're hit with a bit of a time jump. And Abria says they basically are traveling for a few weeks, and it's pretty uneventful. And the cast in this moment, actually, they don't really RP anything for this time. It's just boom, 2-week time jump or whatever. And we're just that is ended with a wisdom saving throw from Fern. And I guess we don't know if she fails or succeeded, but she realizes that all of a sudden she remembers this road. It's the same road that she traveled on when she first came to Amon after leaving the Feywild. And so she just starts feeling like this kind of nostalgia or this memory about this area. And suddenly she feels like pulled towards something like deep in the woods. And so since she's the one in control, she actually starts steering the cart off the road and kind of into the woods. And Orem is up there with her, and he kind of notices they're getting off track, but they're still going in the general direction they need to be. So he doesn't really say anything, because they're still a couple weeks travel away from where they're going ultimately. But Dorian does ask. He's like, "Hey, why are we pulling off the road? What are we doing?"
Right.
And Fern says that she thinks it's safer to not be on the road, be more inconspicuous, and also that she needs to check something. And she asks everyone else, like, "Hey, does anybody else feel like pulled to something over here, like I do?" And Orem and Dariax both also do feel something. Like they said, like something right behind their navel was pulling them in that same direction. And Dariax launches into a little spiel about how, you got to trust the feeling in your gut. And, sometimes that's just like the truest thing you can do is just follow that. And so, because of that, they're like, okay, you know what? We're going to check this out. So they keep getting further and further off the road, deeper and deeper into the woods. And bugs start getting all over Opal, and she is very not about it. But Fern lets her borrow Mister, and he basically becomes her personal exterminator, sitting on her shoulder and eating the bugs and everything. Um, so during this time, we kind of get a little bit of RP with the party, talking about random stuff, and they actually start pressing Dorian for information, being like, "How come you haven't told us anything about yourself?" And
Right.
he's like, you know what? I'm from a small town, just like you guys are." And they're like, "Oh yeah, well, what town?" And he can't come up with anything. He's like,
Yeah. It's like, shoot, what's the name? What's
yeah.
the name?
And
Awkward
so
silence.
exactly. And so they're like, okay, like you don't have to tell us if you don't want to. And he says, maybe in time he'll feel more comfortable, but he'd rather not reveal too much right now. But he does let them know that he had a happy childhood and that he actually does have a brother and that he's just happy to be where he is now. And,
Right.
he'll hopefully share more later. And Dariax basically comforts him, is like, hey, we all have pasts we're not proud of, so don't worry about it. So then Fern actually makes another wisdom saving throw and presumably fails again, but we're not told. And Orem notices her entire like appearance begin to change. Her
Mhm.
eyes go from normal to become like goat-like and more feral. And he's like, "Hey, what's happening to you?" And she does not know this. She wasn't aware, I don't think, but also is not familiar with this change in her. Um, so like I said, they just keep traveling, following this pull that Fern is feeling, and eventually they reach a part of the woods that's like too thick to travel by cart. So Fern gets out and she's like, "Hey, I gotta see what's going on with me. What's going on here? Like, I'm gonna keep going. Y'all do what you want." And as that's happening, there's a great moment between Dorian and Dariax in the back of the cart. And Dariax is basically like, "You know what? I think I figured you out, Dorian. You're a carnival folk." And Dorian kind of messes with him and is like, "You know what? You're exactly right, but don't tell anyone because this is just our little secret." And he actually says that his family was from like this really famous trapeze artist and juggler, and that his father was a famous juggler and performed for a king, and that the king loved it so much he wanted to keep Dorian's father there to like always perform for him. But Dorian's dad wasn't about that, and so he left. And because this upset the king, he put a contract out on Dorian's father's life. So that's why Dorian's like, "You can't tell anyone, because if anyone to find us out about me, it would all be over." And so Darius is like, "Okay, yeah, I won't tell anybody." Um, so then everyone gets out of the cart and they all decide, it's better if we stick together. So we're all going to roll together. And they start making their way on foot um, into the woods. And they ultimately come to this open glade. And there is
Mhm.
this like mysterious gate just sitting there. And if my friend, would you like to take over
Yeah.
from here?
Yeah, yeah. Which great job, by the way. I love, by the way, when DRX is like, "I think you're from the carnival," and he's like, "How did you know?"
Yes.
But yeah, so they get to this spot, and this was a really cool scene, only because it's a throwback to Fern peeling back that false memory and realizing that she had traveled through a gate to eventually make it to Iman. And she recognizes this gate and realizes, oh, this is actually where I came through from the Feywild. And this is like a really interesting place, by the way, this glade that they're in, because things are very much unnatural.
Right.
Um, It's in the spot where there aren't really any insects or creatures around. There's just the flora. But like the motion, I think they might even use the phrase of like it was kind of like it almost felt like the space was almost kind of shimmering.
Yeah.
Some things were very fresh, and other things were starting to decompose. In fact, Dariax checks his rations and notices that his bread or whatever he had on him was actually already molding, even though it should have lasted for much longer. Opal, who's hating all of the the nature adventure already, she sneezes and her spittle, like she spews it out and then it just kind of lingers in the air. And Abria even mentions that the sun and the moon are both up in the sky. So it's a very weird place. It's a very strange place. But Fern is totally locked in on this gate and this temptation, this pull, whatever this is. She basically says, hey, what if we just stepped in for a second? We just went through for a minute and just said hey to everybody, said hey to the fam. Specifically, she says, you could meet my grandmother. And I think maybe it's Orem or someone who's even kind of encouraging her to, maybe you should go through. Do you want to go home? And Fern's kind of like, well, and it's interesting this kind of duality that's happening, because on one hand she's feeling the temptation, she's feeling the pull, but on the other hand she mentions how, well, I was sitting here for a reason and I don't quite know if my job is done.
Right.
So they talk about it, and this temptation continues to fester until finally she's like, maybe I will just step in just for a second. And so she walks up to the gate, and I can't remember if they said it was a reflection of what she saw, or maybe it was just clear, like she could see what was behind it as being actually already there, but yet you could tell there was like the barrier of the gate. Regardless, she slowly puts her hand through, and she immediately begins to smell this intense burning smell, and it kind of freaks her out. And so she pulls her hand back, but this reflection of her hand actually like follows her back out of the gate. And this is such a cool, well-described scene.
Yeah.
The hand comes through, and then from that also comes out the rest of a body. And Fern steps back as this creature basically steps through the gate and stands before her. And it's someone who looks very similar to her. Ashley Johnson is kind of trying to figure out, like, who is this person? And Abria mentions, like, you definitely recognize her. And Fern's like, is this my mother? And this creature says, which, by the way, she looks very similar to Fern. She's darker. She has harder angles. Abria even mentions that she moves in a way that's very unnatural and strange.
Yeah.
Her clothes, it's the same clothes, but they're covered in soot. She has these big, bright fangs. And she's also wearing something, a dark circlet on her head, which at this moment I was like, no way. And she says to Fern, it's time to come home. So like I mentioned, Fern's trying to figure out, who is this person? What's like, who am I looking at? And she says, like, is this my mother? And that's when we realize that this is in fact Dark Fern, as we're calling her. And she says, no, I'm you. Time is different here. And I'm what you should be. It's almost like what you're destined to become. Like, I am you.
Yeah.
And what you will be if you decide to come with me and step through. And Fern's kind of thrown by this. She's like, you definitely don't look like me, in the sense of like, you're a lot rough around the edges. And so she asks, well, what happened to you? And she says, well, I found my power. And she actually notices the crown on her head, and she says, did you put on the circlet? And Fern just smiles, and meanwhile Dariax is like, we still have our circlet, so what's going on here? And Dark Fern even asks, like, do you want it? Do you want the crown? And Fern, interestingly enough, remember, she's neutral, her alignment's neutral. She says, yes, I do want it. But so she asked for like a demonstration of this power, and Dark Fern actually creates this wildfire around the gate that begins to spread. We also know that Mister is really intensely caught up in what's happening here. And we also see behind Dark Fern, on these shadows behind the portal, that almost seem like they're waiting to come through. And Fern asks if this is Sweet Pea, Bumpers, and Peepers, who's a bear, a crocodile, and a rabbit that she knows. Abria starts to describe something happening from one of the characters' perspectives, and it's kind of confusing. You're like, well, who's she talking about right now? She mentions a person's stomach churning and a voice speaking from the dark. It's Abria describes, these are people that you see that they're in danger, you recognize them. And then we actually get a new character. That's who she's describing, someone entirely new to the party who's kind of lingering on the side. And this is fy'ra, a level 4 monk, which I'm not sure if she's actually level 4.
Yeah,
a level 4 monk who's played by Anjali Bhimani. She has a hair of fire. She has a long staff, and she basically tells Darkfern, "Hey, step back from us," and we begin to roll initiative. So we have this really awesome combat scene. Fern asks, "Did you find Mama and Papa?" And Darkfern's like, she keeps goading her to come with her. And actually, Darkfern mentions that basically throws Grandma under the bus and says that she lied to us. All of the letters came from her, not from our parents, which to me implied that I guess at some point Fern was receiving letters from her parents, and Darkfern's basically saying, no, that was a lie. It was from our grandma. But anyway, the coolest part before this fight is when Aurum steps in front of Fern, and so does fy'ra, as to sort of protect Fern. And Darkfern kind of laughs at their poor show of competition and says, "That's the funny thing about time. I've killed you all already." But you're like, wait, what? What is that? So Darkfern has her own version of Mister, also kind of twisted. She also summons a bunch of scorpions that are made out of burning driftwood. We have the battle happen. Opal tries to poison spray one of the scorpions, and she doesn't have her magic. And we see Ted basically saying, "Hey, just apologize." And she's like, "No, I won't." And like even everyone else is being like, "I don't know what's going on, but please get over yourself, apologize." And part of me kind of thought this was the players too being like, "Okay, but really, like we need your help here." But she does have some cool flavor where she uses her whip, she uses her knives. We even have Dorian inspired Dariax and basically saying, "Now's your chance, kill Mister." And Dariax is like, yes, finally. But so they fight with the scorpions, they fight with Darkfern. And what's interesting is Darkfern actually looks at fy'ra and says, "I've never killed you before. This is going to be fun." Which kind of makes me wonder, and we'll get into this later, but like the time, like her mentioning that we've done this before,
what's going on?
Maybe wonder if fy'ra is like the changing factor, the thing that isn't normally there. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But so the two misters fight each other. Our Mister gets pretty rough. And Dariax, you can tell he's trying to do like a really cool like attack, and he's like, "Oh, dang it!" And he reaches out and heals Mister. And then he's like, "We're never going to talk about this again." And some Redditors were joking that maybe Mister kind of like on his deathbed, like gave him the poop hand, because Mister's actually been throwing like this hot poop at Darkfern as well. In the fight, everyone's basically battling. They're actually rolling incredibly well. Aurum has an insane roll where he gets a natural 20 crit on Darkfern. He acts it out really well. And actually, Fern has this cool moment where she tries to use Stonky's ring to pull the circlet off of Darkfern's head.
Yeah.
And Abria says something like, "You're going to have to roll really well." I think she rolled a 17. It seemed like, I think she even told her you need to roll an 18. And she rolled, I think, a 17. And it was kind of like, what could happen here?
Yeah.
But so she almost pulls it off, and Darkfern kind of grabs it and pulls it back to her own head. fy'ra gets the final blow, hits her staff into Darkfern's throat, and then kind of pushes through, and the body just crumbles away. And this is actually this is the turn before Darkfern was about to bring through the portal a big, dark, shadowy creature, which might have been really bad, especially considering at this point Opal has been knocked unconscious. We know in D&D rules it's unconscious. They also say a couple of times, "You died. We think you died." So we'll have to talk about exactly what was happening there. But as they finish off the enemies, some people show up at the edge of the glade and help finish off the last scorpion. And an elven woman in a purple robe, who seems to be the leader, basically says, "What have you done?" And that's where the episode goes to a break. I planned on that being very quick. That actually ended up being very long. So,
That's Critical Role, baby.
yeah. You take it from there. What happens after the break?
Yeah, so when we come back from the break, we're given this moment with Fern. She actually makes an Arcana check and rolls really high. And Abria says that she looks through the gate, and although the shadows are like dissipating away, like the magical energy of it is, she says that she notices a figure stands like at as a sentinel in like the back of Fern's mind. And Fern actually recalls this figure, and we're given this name of the unforgiving High War Queen of the Burning Veil, matriarch of the Sealy Court. And what? And she says that as the gate fades, so does this like recollection Fern has. Um, so not sure if Fern like actually remembers that she remembers that or not. We'll talk about it later, but crazy moment. And so after we get that little quick tidbit, we then cut to Opal, who again is unconscious. And so this is kind of taking place in like the theater of Opal's mind. She's in like a dark place, and all of a sudden she finds herself face to face with Ted. And the two basically get into kind of this emotional argument, and it actually was like Abria and Amy kind of busted out the acting chops. They like really killed this moment in a good way, not a bad way. And basically Opal is mad at Ted because Ted, she couldn't use her magic when she needed to, and Ted's mad at Opal for like not just being able to say sorry and like being so stubborn to the point where like she might literally die because of it. And basically it's just this big sibling type of argument where Opal kind of resents Ted for always like clinging on to her and being like, I'm sorry that like I was the star of the show and you always were the second fiddle. And Ted's like, I never had a problem with that. I just, I was happy just to give everything away to protect you. And Opal's like, I never asked you to do that. And like I said, basically normal sibling kind of fight, but Abria tells Amy that like, Opal, you realize that like she actually is like deeply sobbing and feels like this true pain in her chest, referring to Ted. And so they start kind of to reconcile a little bit, and she's like, you make it out of this, you'll have your powers back, and just please protect yourself. And they basically just cry and say that they love each other. And then we kind of snap back as to back in the real world, and um Dariax is finishing off the evil mister, doing like some cool theatrics with his killing blow. And fy'ra is like, hey, is somebody gonna heal Opal? Like, if Mr. Dwarf, isn't this your job? Like, why aren't you taking care of this? And he's like, I was doing it. I was doing it. And so while they're kind of having that little spat, Fern just goes over and heals Opal. And that's kind of this all happening in like the same moment. And so Opal comes to from her unconscious conversation with Ted. And with Ted's final words being, "Don't you fucking die." And so Opal comes back and is like, "What happened?" And the party explains to her that she got knocked out. I think some of them even say that she died, but again, you think you mentioned this. We'll talk about it later. But she's like, "Yeah," and you were out. And so Opal then realizes that Ted was just telling her the truth, that she almost just died. And so she casts Eldritch Blast on a nearby stump to test and see if she has her magic, and she indeed does. Um, and then Abria has everyone in this moment call for a wisdom save, and Aurum, Fern, and Opal all roll high enough that she says they feel a very strong connection with fy'ra. That they didn't know her name or anything, but they have an intense familiarity with her. Like something is there. Um, so then, like Blake mentioned a second ago, we also have these other new people that have shown up. And so Aurum and fy'ra both get between everyone else in the party and these new mysterious elves. And um, the leader basically walks up and introduces herself as Marata Neselor. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And she's from Singorn. She explains that like this area is their woods and they're, patrolling it, making sure what's going on here is on on the level, and they're basically like, what is happening here? Like, what are you guys doing? What have you done to these woods? And they mentioned that they've never seen anything like this, like the gate and like the Fey energy and like the weird things that are happening here. And more elves behind her start fanning out, and the party notices that they've got these like big crystal like rod looking things, and they're like shoving them in the ground in intervals like around this space. And they're asking like, what are those for? And they're like, this is to clean up this magical mess that you've made here. um fy'ra then asks that, where are you guys from? How far away is this Singorn place? Could we perhaps rest there for the night and rest? And they find out that it's actually 3 or 4 days away, so they're like, okay, we're not going to do that. And then the party tells fy'ra about the glitter shitter, and she's like, all right, we'll go there. And so they're gonna make their leave there, but before they do, Fern asks Murata like what they've seen around here and what's going on. And that's when Murata says, I've never seen this before, which is very strange because like if these are their woods and they're familiar with them, you'd think they'd know about this like Fey gate.
Mhm.
But she's like, yep, don't know what's going on here, never seen this, and kind of unsettled by it. And then we get this moment while these conversations are taking place that Opal um gets her mind invaded by Murata, who cast detect thoughts on her. And Abria has Amy say, "Hey, what are you thinking about right now?" And Amy reveals that she was thinking about that conversation with Ted and her relationship with her sister. And then she feels this other presence in her mind, kind of like exploring those memories without her permission, and feels really like invaded and like betrayed. And she realizes that it was Murata poking around in there, and she's like, what are you doing? And like Murata's like, I wanted to find some stuff out. And she basically gets
Yeah,
really
yeah.
upset that like she had no consent for such a thing. And so tempers start to flare, but fy'ra again kind of gets in between them, as like, we're going to be making our leave now. And so they do, but the one last thing that happens is Fern is like, "Hey, if you guys happen to go in that gate or see some stuff around here and you see my grandmother, please tell her hello from me." And it kind of Murata's kind of caught off guard by like the what's the word? Like kindness, or like she didn't expect that from her, so
She
she was
kind of
kind of,
feels it's like she empathizes a little bit with her.
yeah,
She's like,
yeah,
no, okay, yeah.
like okay. And she's like, all right, I will tell her that, and if we see her. And so then they're making their leave, and we get this kind of revelation about fy'ra in this moment, that she is able to like close her eyes, and she describes like closing her eyes and looking up at her eyelids, and this is like her way of communicating with something. Like maybe it's her god, maybe, I mean, who
Mhm.
knows? We're not told anything, but she does that to communicate with some higher power or some other power. And she she says that, or it's revealed to her that one of this group has put a drop of thought, like ink spreading in water, into the rest of the group.
Mm.
So even though they're not going to go to Singorn, where those elves are from, this isn't over yet, which very cryptic, and I'm sure we'll dive
Mhm.
into it later. But so then the party make their leave. They head back to the glitter shitter, as it were. Um, and on this walk, we have a few moments here. Orem is kind of concerned about Fern and this dark circlet, since everything he just saw with the dark version of Fern, and he kind of like gets near her and is like, concentrating. Like you can see he's like in deep thought about like looking at the circlet, looking back to Fern. And Fern kind of notices that she's doing this, and they kind of have a moment where she like places her hand on his cheek, and as no words are spoken, I don't think, but definitely some vibes. Um,
Mhm.
and
Ship it.
exactly. And meanwhile, Opal too is eyeing the circlet and says she's considering her options, whatever that means. And Dorian notices her kind of staring at this, and he kind of walks over and tries to connect with her. And she's still kind of mad that he hasn't revealed anything about his past, and so she's not really trying to, have him come get up in her business. But he just says, I could tell from the way you were arguing during the fight, like, he's like, I know that fight. That's a sibling fight, and he's like, I have a brother. I understand. So if you ever want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, I'm here for you. And she's like, okay. Um, so they make the long walk that they joke about, but they make the long walk back, and fy'ra finally formally introduces herself. She says she's this protector of sorts, and that they don't know her, but she knows them, but she doesn't know how she knows them or why she knows them. But hopefully her actions in that battle have spoken louder than any words could, and she's proved that she's trustworthy, that she's here to help. And Orm rolls an insight check on this, and he rolls really well, and he gleans that she's being completely sincere and earnest in what she does and doesn't know. Um, so they're like, okay, you know what? She can come with us. And Darius lets her know what they're doing, that they're traveling to these ruins of Conira. And when fy'ra finds that out, she laughs and she says, "So this is why we journey together." And they just jump up all in the wagon and set off. So seemingly in that moment, she maybe had like a clicking, like
Mm-hmm.
some sort of understanding there. Um, so back in the wagon, back on the road to Byrodin, we get about another week and a half of travel, and they finally arrive. And in the back of the wagon, Dorian's showing how Dariax had to juggle, still kind of going in on his carny folk thing.
Yeah.
And they make it to the gates, and Opal's like, "Hey, let us in." And they're like, "Opal, Opal who?" And it basically just teasing her, and we basically get the idea that okay, Byrodin is a small enough town where like everyone knows everyone, and Opal's embarrassed to be coming back because she hasn't like accomplished what she wants to accomplish yet. She's returning home without her glory yet, as it were. Um, so they're ribbing her, but they come in, and basically as soon as they're in the gates, this lady runs up to the cart, presumably having heard the fact that Opal's name was just mentioned, and she was like, "Opal, Opal, are you in there?" And we come to find out that this is Ruby Lee Beckford, wife of the War Ringer and head of the festivities. And festivities there are, because as we pull into the city, you can see that there's like this big fair and like tents and like lots of activity happening. And Opal basically lets them know, like, oh yeah, this is the Gem of Byrodin pageant that we have every year. It's basically just a big fair, and there's a pageant and there's a lot going on. And so Ruby runs up and she's like, "Oh my gosh, are you going to be competing today?" And basically is just so excited to see her. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're here. When is Ted coming back?" And Opal's like, "Wait, Ted's not here?" And Ruby reveals that, oh yeah, she's not here. She left shortly after you did. Everyone around here just assumed that you guys met up at some point in Amon or something. And so Opal's like, "Oh, okay, interesting. I thought she was here." Um, so then Ruby's telling everybody that, welcome to the festival, but she takes a keen notice of Orem, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you are way too skinny. Come with me." And she just starts trying to feed him food, and there's like a big pie festival happening at the fair, and he's like, "I've never had pie." And so everyone's like, "What?" And so all these vendors are trying to give him little slices of pie to try and get his reaction on them, and it's just a great segment. And he like starts having the sweats and just is so full, and basically becomes
Pie
like a
sweats.
yeah, and becomes like a mini celebrity amongst the food vendors.
Yeah.
And but while that's happening, meanwhile, Opal continues to explain like the pageant to everybody else, and Dorian's like, "Oh yeah, we had stuff like this where I was from too." And fy'ra once again does her eye communication thing and asks, like, "Do we have time for this?" And the voice or whatever in her head, lets her know that, this is the last bit of comfort you guys will have before the road ahead. So like enjoy it basically. And so
Mhm.
fy'ra's like opens her eyes and looks at Opal and is like, "Okay, like tell us more, lead the way." And um if you'd like to take it from there, just go up on Pageant, baby.
Yeah, it was very ominous, by the way, of fy'ra being like, should we really be doing this? And just that strong sense of it. This is literally the last sort of moment of happiness you're going to have. I was very
Yeah,
ominous.
yeah,
So
it was.
But yeah, so then after this, they have the pageant, and they're informed that the pageant's basically three parts. It's the interview, the talent show, and evening wear. And Opal, Fern, Dorian, and Dariax all decide, hey, we're going to enter into the pageant. And we'll mention this later, but for the talent show portion, they do decide, well, we don't want to compete with Opal. So we'll just perform with her for that section, even though like some of the one of the employees of the pageant is kind of like or aside, Bria actually has characters for them to play, just so that they're still part of the event. Liam gets to be the absolute best person in Exandria, Cinna Brightbow, and Jolly is going to be Lyle Vester, who is well, I'll just describe both of them real quick. So Cinna is this blonde dwarven woman who runs a jewelry shop. Her family has lived there for 100 years, and she actually won this competition about 15 years earlier. Lyle Vester seems to be some kind of, I got the sense of like a high school rival.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they really hate each other. They've competed against each other before in the past, and she's really the Gary Oak to our I can't think of the main character.
Ash Ketchum.
Ash Ketchum. Yeah, he's sort of yeah, it's they are the dueling people in this pageant.
Yeah.
So for the interview portion, Cinna is brought up and she's asked, or Ruby asked in this great Southern accent, she's like, if you were a gym, what kind of gym would you be? And Cinna, who's being played by Liam O'Brien, who is so freaking good in this section, but says I would be it has this awesome Irish accent.
Yeah.
Says I would be an emerald green like the city, and the crowd just like, oh yeah, we love you. Dariax goes up and is basically asked, and by the way, he decides he wants to change his clothes using his cloak, but he's not sure what to wear going out for this section. So he actually copies exactly what Dorian's wearing. And it's this really awesome, great outfit. And everyone actually loves it. Even though it's not the evening wear section, they're like, this guy looks good. And people are so so appreciative of like how good he looks that like Dorian sort of on the side, like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, that is my outfit.
Yeah. Great.
But separate from that, Dariax is asked the same question. If you were a gym, what kind would you be? And, you know, being our low intelligence, low wisdom character, Dariax misunderstands and says that he would be peach jam. The crowd is kind of like, you know, it's definitely miscongeniality vibes. But so they're all like, yeah, we love food. And so they're all like, yeah, okay, peach jam.
Let's get it.
So the crowd really likes it, although Ruby's kind of like, I don't know about that. Next up is Opal, who's wearing this really beautiful outfit, asked the same question. And she says that she would be a ruby because they're beautiful and they're the color of the heart. And she's obviously just trying to appease or appeal to Ruby herself, who seems to be kind of the main judge of this pageant.
Yeah.
Dorian is next, and he's really upset about Dariax taking his outfit. So he grabs the cloak from him and decides he's going to make his own outfit. But as he's putting it on, he's looking at Dariax, and he actually ends up sort of unwittingly copying Dariax's clothes for himself. And it's all the wrong sizes. It like doesn't fit at all. And so he comes out and everyone's kind of like, are you good? Like, do you need to, change or anything? But so, and then it totally flubs this section. He looks bad. He gets asked the same question and he says, I'd be a diamond because it's hard to like me. I couldn't even get that out without laughing. He says, it's hard like me. And then everyone's kind of like, like what? And then he's like, oh, I mean, an opal. An opal is my favorite gem. After the section, we see Lyle Vester really rip on Opal. She's like, oh, it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
And, kind of gives her a hard time for leaving. And then when she goes up on stage, she gets asked a different question and says, what does Byrodin mean to you? And she starts talking about how it's like the best place in the world. And you can tell she's leading up to saying, but most of all, it's home, with like
Yeah.
this really great line. Well, Dariax actually uses thaumaturgy to make it sound like she's farting through the whole speech. And Ruby and the crowd are kind of like, Ruby especially is like, yep, I get it. We're dairy folk. We get it. Just get yourself taken care of, maybe. No big deal. And Opal actually gives Dariax a really big kiss for this, just out of appreciation for it. And then Fern comes up and she's asked, what's your favorite flower? And she says an oleander because it has so many uses. It's pretty, it smells good, and it can kill someone. Ruby's like, yep, I get it. I've been married more than once. Which props to Abria for just the back and forth.
Yeah.
So they have that section. Next up is the talent portion. And again, they all decide, you know what, let's help Opal with her section.
Mm-hmm.
Which the person who they're talking to is like someone that Opal knew from high school who's like backstage, is kind of like, okay, that's not really quite what we do, but sure, that's fine. So first we have Lyle Vester comes up. She's on a pony. She's prancing around. Dariax once again uses his magic. I guess he used like mage hand to basically grab the horse's testicles. And the horse bucks and throws Lyle off, but she lands gracefully and the crowd goes crazy. And again, Opal's like, thank you, Dariax. Cinna's up and she's wearing this green mask and a cape. She brings up this big block of ice and she's like looking for an assistant. She's like, look, my assistant. And Orem, who's like having the pie sweats, is kind of like, me? Brings up Orem, and it's such a great scene because now Liam is acting himself, engaging with himself.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is my assistant, and brings up Orem and ties him to the block of ice and turns to the crowd and says, will the halfling live or will he die? And everyone's kind of like, wait, what? And fy'ra in the crowd is actually like trying to push her way through to make sure that he is safe and okay. So Cinna throws the first axe and it just barely misses his head by a couple of centimeters. And everyone's kind of like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And before we while everything's crazy and intense and it's like, what do we even do? Cinna, Liam O'Brien just interrupts everyone talking and says, let's have another go, and throws a second axe. And this one also, let me catch the details here because I can't remember. Each one beat his AC and they land perfectly right above his head, right between his legs. And then the final one, which was a natural 20, lands right next to his neck. All while fy'ra is trying to get up and make sure he's okay. Crowd is going nuts. Cinna stage dives to the crowd and gets surfed away, basically. So Opal and the crew are next. They have this performance. Opal is playing a really soft, beautiful song, and Abria lets her know that like the crowds are really not vibing with it because they had just this incredible, intense moment with Cinna, and now it's come down really far. What ends up happening is she's having this heartfelt moment. She's saying, I missed you all. I'm so glad to be home. The performance is really, it's a low roll moment anyway. And so the rest of the team basically come out and hype it up. And, Fern has her pan flute. Dariax is slamming a spear on the ground to the tune of the beat and just trying to get like the crowd going. And Opal makes her final performance check and gets a dirty 20. So Lyle's disappointed, and Opal basically being like, you cheated. Basically says, the world's changed you. Ted said this would happen before she left. So we're getting more insight into Ted. And Dariax basically stands up for her and says, yeah, if you don't have any friends, it is better to perform solo. And then basically makes another Lyle fart sound as she's walking away. Lastly, we have the evening wear portion where they're supposed to wear their best outfits. And last year's winner comes out on stage. It's this person named Olivancer Fields. He's wearing this long cape, black armor, and pauldrons. And Opal's like, yeah, we dated in high school. Dariax is going to go out first, but he realizes, oh, crap, I already used my awesome outfit originally when I stole Dorian's outfit. And so he decides to basically look like a Tin Man, which he uses the cloak to make himself look like he's made out of tin. He comes out. And everyone's kind of like, what? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah, this is. And so they're kind of just like, okay. Which Opal, feeling bad for him, comes out, tries to hype it up. And the crowd's like, okay, yeah, that was okay. Dorian is next. and he decides to wear his original outfit that Dariax has stolen. And he takes off his clothes, and he basically, the bottom line, dude is like jacked. Opal's like, "You're hot."
Yeah.
Like, he looks really good, and he struts out. And he also wears his boots, that are, he says they're winged boots, which I thought was really interesting. And he uses the boots to levitate and basically walk above the stage on the air. The crowd just goes nuts for it. He's actually kind of embarrassed by how much affection is being shown his way.
Yeah.
And then Lyle is next. She comes out in this beautiful ball gown. She has these fireflies that are in the folds that are flying up as she's spinning and dancing. And actually, Darax himself is so like, "Oh dang, you look good," that he like forgets to mess with her this time. Opal comes out with the big dress with lots of tulle, and it has an armored chest plate. fy'ra casts this orange glow on her as she's walking around. The crowd loves it. She looks beautiful. And then Cinna comes up next, comes out on the stage swinging on a rope, does a flip off the rope. She's wearing a green dress. And she's like, "I don't even care if I win. I just love you all so much." And again, everyone just goes nuts for this. And then Fern comes out in a similar outfit from before, but she's like ripped off parts of it to make herself look, I guess, more sexier.
Yeah.
And even does like primal savagery with like her claws and her fangs. And so that is basically the pageant. So the results are tallied. Everyone comes back up on stage. Cinna gets revealed to basically get third place. It's a huge crime.
Stop the steal.
Yeah. Lyle is given what we realize is basically the first, the actual runner-up, and it's the title is called the Gem of Our Hearts, and it's basically the person who takes over the Gem of Byrodin role if the winner can't for some reason. And then the winner is crowned, and it turns out to be Opal. And she says how much she loves the town and accepts the crown. And she actually goes up to her room into sees Ted's bed and basically sets the crown on Ted's bed and walks out. And the crowd, the party ends up, drinking and enjoying the rest of the night. Meanwhile, Orem kind of gets away to a quiet place and begins practicing his strikes, basically. And he remembers basically who he is in this moment. And in this moment, the backdrop's lit up, and these are mentioned earlier in the episode when they first come into the town. But these statues of Vex and Vax from what's the name? What's the name of the band?
Vox Machina.
Vox Machina. Yeah. So, and then there is a post-credit scene, and Abria basically says Ted looks down into the darkness around her, within her. She feels so close to home, though she can't touch it. She feels alone despite her existence within and beside Opal. She feels the seed of potential, of purpose. The seed begins to grow. And that is episode 4 of Exandria Unlimited.
Whew. Well done, man. You knocked the pageant part out of the park.
Dude, it feels like there's just so much to cover, and like there's also stuff we leave on the table. Maybe for our listeners, if you're still tracking with us, let us know in the comments if you like this longer recap form, or if we definitely like telling the story. Mm-hmm. But if you prefer a shorter version, let us know that too. And Will, my good friend, I apologize. I have to pee. I've got to pay.
Okay, so, go for it.
Talk amongst yourselves just a second. Yeah, 1 second.
But yeah, for real, let us know, because it's hard to kind of gauge how in depth to go, because like Blake said, we love doing it, and I could probably talk about the episode for longer than the episode runs, which is an impressive feat given Critical Role's runtime. But so like, for me, like, I love an in-depth recap, but I know for some people, they just might want like a 5-minute version. I think the one we probably just did was probably closer to like 40. We'll have to see when we go back and edit it out. But yeah, please let us know. Do you like the long recap? Do you like the in-depth one, or would you much prefer just a quick one that hit the main points and, could could be told in a few minutes. So we would love to know. Um, but again, since we just talked about it, that final moment with Orem and him practicing with the backdrop of like the fair and the festivities happening in the background, and the lit up statue of Vax and Vex. I just thought that was such a cool moment, especially like I know they're not. I don't think there's anything like implied in that moment of like a connection or anything, but I just loved the like meta connection of like Liam kind of finding himself while the freaking statue of his last character is in the background. I just loved it. Welcome
What
back.
I missed. Sorry
Nothing.
about that.
No,
I was
you're
like,
good.
there's so much I want to unpack, and I knew I couldn't do it with P brain, basically.
It's fine.
It's a thing, just like bacon lips, you know?
Exactly.
Well, dude, what a freaking amazing episode. Like I said, definitely my favorite one thus far. And what do you want to talk about first? I mean, what do you want to jump into?
Ah, man, I don't know. I really don't even know. That I guess we got to say it again though that Liam killed it. Like Senna was robbed, I honestly.
Yeah,
He
it, yeah, watching him was so fun. And my wife actually watched a lot of the episode too. And it's always fun when someone who's not familiar with Critical Role gets like firsthand exposure to just the acting chops of the people on the show.
yeah,
Not just Liam, but you mentioned Abria and Amy,
right.
which that back and forth happens so quickly. So for them to have the dialogue and just the retorts, I mean, that was really great. And then I got to say it again, Ashley Johnson's, wow, why can't I talk? Ashley Johnson's, her reactions, like you can tell she's so in it just on her face.
Yeah,
I mean, it's great seeing these people play their characters and other characters, I guess.
agreed. I mean, Liam should look into voice acting, I think. He's pretty good at it.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Um, but yeah, I
Do you want to
loved it
just
too.
do you want to just start at the start and just pick on like the things that we really liked, or
Yeah, sure.
does that work? Or
Sounds like a good plan.
I just liked on the basically the carriage ride away how they were having such bad luck rolling. And we didn't
Yes.
mention this in the recap, but there were some natural ones. I think Dariax had a 2 that was turned down to a 1. And I think when they finally, I think when Orem basically was trying to take over to when they got the horses to slow down and ride off, I think Abria even said like, you know, I'm not going to make you roll because I'm afraid of
Yes.
basically us being stuck here.
Yes.
Um, so
They have had such bad rolls. Matt, especially, I feel like has rolled so bad like the entire campaign. I think he's mentioned it like anytime he's a player that happens to him, but he's such a good sport about it. Like he always just plays right into it.
yeah, I think that's again like a thing about D&D is like it can be really frustrating to have this really cool moment in your head and you really want to make something really awesome happen and then you roll and it's like a 1 or a 2 or something just super low.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that ruins it for me. But these guys do a great job of basically just letting it roll off them and be like, okay, well, it just is what it is, I guess. And I think everyone but Matt made up for it. Orem had some natural 20s. Ashley had some natural 20s. There were some really high rolls,
Yeah, there were.
especially in the fight with Darkfern, that seemed to balance it out.
Yeah, very true. They're all they roll with the punches no matter like any way it goes, and that's part of what makes them so good. I think is just kind of like you mentioned. This is kind of like sort of connecting it, just like the improbability, I guess, of
Mm-hmm.
being able to have those great acting moments, but also being able to like roll with the natural one and what that might mean for what's happening. So
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think? I mean, are they being followed? Do you think by the nameless ones, or
I mean, ultimately, yes. I mean, I would have to like Posca's, not gonna let that just slide, right? So I don't know if they're like actively have somebody watching their every move, but I think like they are definitely like she's after them. So
right?
and now okay, well I don't want to get to that yet, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I think they're being followed, but like I said, probably not like there's not somebody in the bushes right now type of thing, but
Right.
like they're definitely being
Right.
pursued, I guess. That's a
Right.
good word to put it.
Yeah. So what do you think about the scene of getting pulled to the Fey Gate?
Yeah, interesting. When just everything that happened there, right? Like so I when she first said she remembered it, I was like, "Oh yeah, I bet this is like where she came out of the Feywild or whatever." But the fact that she felt blah, blah, the fact that she felt pulled to it, I was just imagining that like she's familiar with that magic. She's familiar with like that portal and it's just like a familiarity thing. But then when she started like actually like being drawn to it, I was like, okay, maybe like there's something happening there. Like maybe it's active, maybe somebody else is coming through. And that's kind of what we got. But then once we actually got like this evil version of Fern that is from the future, like I'm completely lost. I have no idea what's happening there. And I imagine it's all tied that like maybe even the evil Dark Fern is the one that
Mhm.
was pulling her there to like I mean, since
Yeah.
her hand had to go through it for her to come out, like maybe she needed Fern to be able to pass through, and that's why she was getting pulled there. I don't know. I have a ton of questions. Do you have any thoughts on like what was
It's
happening there?
this is definitely like the perfect example of like I wonder, okay, what would have happened? Because you have I think you're spot on that it wasn't just like an attraction to the Feywild that was like, oh, I want to check this out, but like a literal pull.
Yeah,
And even when Dark Fern is defeated, I'm not going to say killed, I'm going to say defeated because I don't know if we've seen the last of her, but when she's defeated, we even have this moment of the War Queen who basically emotes a disappointment or a frustration that Dark Fern has failed.
yeah,
And so to me, that I think you're spot on that Dark Fern has been sort of like pulling, tugging on her to come to this spot. But I think about things of like what would have happened. Like she put her hand in, she smelled the burning smell, and she pulled her hand back out. What if she had? What if Ashley had been like, "I step all the way through"?
yeah,
I mean, what happens then? Or with the crown, which she realized afterwards that she actually would not have been able to pull the crown off her. But what if she had rolled a natural 20 for pulling the crown off Dark Fern? Like things like that are really interesting to me because you just wonder what happened was still great, but you wonder, it leaves so much on the table in terms of, man, this was just a crazy, crazy set of moments.
yeah. And do you, do you think it actually was like a Dark Fern from the future, or was that like manipulation?
Um,
Because I
I think
can't.
it,
I don't know.
I think it was a Dark Fern because of the line on where fy'ra says something like, you'll fail this time or something like that. And Dark Fern says, that's the funny thing about time. I've killed you all already, which you're just like, so they've had this moment happen before, I guess.
See, I wasn't
Um,
convinced of that interpretation, but it could be. But it could also
okay.
just
Well,
be that like, and I don't want to steer you off track if you had a point you were making there.
no, no, no. I usually just aimlessly talk.
Okay.
So,
So it could mean exactly that. Like this moment has happened before, and Dark Fern kills them in this moment, right? But I kind of interpreted it as if this really is like a Dark Fern from the future, then some like perhaps
oh,
in Dark Fern's past, she maybe
yes.
killed all of them, and that's like what led her to become what she is now.
Yeah. Okay, that does. Okay, yeah, that makes your version makes a lot more sense.
So
We'll have to go
like
back to the recap and like that section where I was like, what's the changing variable? If you rise the variable. It's like, wait,
well,
what?
well, it is interesting that Furai is, that like Fern wasn't familiar with her. I don't know. We're getting into weird time travel stuff, which we've been talking about Loki, so like I guess we're primed for it. But I don't know. It gets like I don't know how seriously they're taking these like time travel rules, if it even is indeed time travel. Like again, maybe it's just like a manipulation. I don't know, but I guess maybe putting the crown on is maybe what like led to her killing everyone else or whatever. But
Mm,
like uh, we're going like time travel isn't really a thing that's been explored. So this is just weird territory, I feel like all around. Like
mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what to think about it, I guess.
Let me ask you this, since you're the veteran of CR1 and CR2, the first two campaigns, the War Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a character we've seen before, been referenced before, mentioned before? Mentioned the Sealy Court. Like, what are these things? What's the Burning Veil?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Like, I don't think this character has ever been referenced before. Now, it's
So then,
possible that,
what a drop then? Like a
yeah,
name drop, I guess.
yeah, like it got like she's got more titles than Khaleesi, and apparently is like apparently is super important or powerful at least. So I don't know. I think like some of those like the Burning Veil slash the Sealy Court may have been mentioned at one point or another, but it's definitely not like something people are like we'd be intimately familiar with. But perhaps it has been mentioned at some point. But yeah, none of that really meant anything to me other than like ominous, dark warmongerer. And just the unforgiving is the beginning of that title, which is just like okay. And so is I guess the implication is that this person, the War Queen, is who was orchestrating all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and is she connected to the Spider Queen, or is the circlet just kind of like the AK-47 that they happen to be using and isn't really connected to it in the whole? Like, are these all machinations of the Spider Queen ultimately? I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if it is the same queen. It seems to me, since it's already been referenced as the Spider Queen, to then change the name would be interesting, to now refer to her as the War Queen.
Yeah.
So my interpretation is that it's a separate faction, and I was gonna say that it seems like they're all vying for the crown in some way, but on the same token, Dark Fern was really trying to get Fern to come through the portal, and
Yeah.
not really like, hey, Dariax, you come through, because Dariax has it, right? And
Right.
so it seems, I say vying for the circlet, but maybe not. It seems like Fern is a really important piece to this person's plans. I did have my Jamie moment of like, Jamie, pull this up for us. I Googled, because I hadn't looked it up yet, the War Queen and just whatever I could see. And there's nothing on it. And so I guess it is a new character,
Hmm.
which for me, it's we've been talking about the stakes of the show. I mean, the stakes have from episode 1 have been high. To me, it's again, it feels like every scene and every episode keeps the stakes keep going higher and higher, because now I have all these questions on who is the War Queen and what's her motivations. And I also wonder if the sigil is somewhat related to the War Queen.
Yeah, I mean, probably. I mean, at least tangentially, you'd think. But like, yeah, like you said, the stakes are high. We got, and I'm sorry not to keep waxing on this, but time travel, like that. I feel like that's like the biggest can of worms you could possibly open, and now we're there.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's you make a good point about like they wanted Fern. You know, she was like, Fern, come with me, and Fern doesn't have the circlet. So it seems like this maybe ties into the grander mystery of the show about like what the hell is even happening before session 1 that we aren't privy to. Like, what were
Mhm.
they doing in the crater and stuff? Like, maybe this is all tied together. And I know we kind of speculated that maybe Fern has some larger part to play here that perhaps she doesn't remember because they're missing some of their memories. And, we know for certain that her memories have been manipulated, at least in the sense of the memory of her coming from the Feywild. She was like, it was masked by another
Mhm.
memory. And we also know that she pulled Mister out with that power of the crater, which is the same thing that the bad guy did that killed a bunch of those fire tamers. So there's like
Yeah. What?
little things here that might point to
Sure.
Fern having some purpose here, and evil
Mhm.
Fern is trying to like facilitate that or something. I don't know.
Maybe stop her from fulfilling that purpose. I don't
Yeah.
know. I do wonder that moment where Fern has the Arcana check and has this sense of the War Queen and the presence of the War Queen, excuse me. And Abria basically says, as this moment passes, so does your knowledge
Yeah.
of this. To me, it made me wonder if this sort of like memory wiping, memory implantation, whatever it is is somehow related to the War Queen, which I don't know. And it was also interesting how this episode seemed to confirm, because we've talked a lot about, does the party know what happened in the crater and they're just not talking about it, like a
Hmm.
session zero that we didn't see?
Yeah,
Or is it also part of the things are fuzzy, but we also know we have some details that we are there, but for some weird RP reason, we don't really necessarily talk about it. And it seems like it's the latter, that even when they meet fy'ra, it's like, okay, we don't know you, but we know you. And
right.
same thing for fy'ra. It's like, okay, I know you guys, but I don't really know how I know you. Which woman in dark clothing with hair of fire. This is fy'ra, right? From the memory in the crater.
Oh, oh, I hadn't put that together, but you think she might have been the one the fire tamers were talking about?
Because we talked about the fire tamers positioned it as an evil person, I think, or someone who was, and you and I talked about in the last episode, maybe that was just the impression, but it was actually someone who was there to help. And the descriptions are very similar. Because I mean, fy'ra literally has fire for hair.
That is true.
Um, and I think it even mentioned her outfit was darker clothing. And so for me, I thought, okay, that must be the crater person, which I don't know if it is or not, but
Mhm.
it would make sense how they know each other if they've already had this moment in the crater from session zero.
That is a super interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. So yeah, I mean, it totally could be. Um, and maybe I don't know. Like clearly, fy'ra is able to be like summoned, teleported, or just appears where she's needed or something. That's the impression I got, that she just appeared in that forest in that moment because like
Yeah.
she was, and maybe that has something to do with time travel too. Like maybe we're playing, like maybe we're really just actually playing in that sandbox, and maybe that's why there's some
What
memory issues.
was there something also about I thought whenever she was being at some point in the scene, which fy'ra was such a great character, by the way. Um, Gilmore got mentioned, and like Gilmore's shop got mentioned, and I didn't fully grasp if they were saying that fy'ra knew Gilmore or was sent by Gilmore or something. Do you remember what I'm talking about at all?
Yeah, I think it was when they get back to the cart and she sees the cart and she's like, um, oh well, this is conspicuous or something like that. But I think I had the same thought, but when I was going through making the notes for the recap, I think her acknowledgement moment was to the ruins of Kinara, because that's when she says, "Oh, this is why we journey together." It was right after the Gilmore moment, but
Yeah.
I think that her recognition was to the ruins, not to Gilmore.
Yeah, okay. Because that made me wonder if like was she sent by Gilmore to protect the party or something. It was very confusing. I'll have to go back and check it again, but regardless, it seems like there's some common thread that isn't, and this has been a running theme of the show, of like these common threads that seem to be implied but not outright stated.
Yeah,
And it definitely makes us wonder as the audience, okay, what's really going on here?
I know, and it really is just crazy that like it really hasn't been touched on, like only very, very lightly. Like there's this like grand mystery in this show, and like they're like not holding the audience's hand at all. But I mean, I get maybe it's possible that we are Mephistoing, reaching really far, and like this is not even part of the show. We're not supposed to be having these questions, but I don't know. It seems like we are, and
Mhm.
I don't know. And I think even I don't remember the exact moment, so maybe I'm just making this up. But in one of the early episodes, maybe the first one even, I think Abria even mentioned that like someone, like you felt like, hey, we're missing someone. You remember that?
See, now I don't want to be making this up either, because it's one of those things like the sleeper effect where someone's like, didn't this happen? You're like, yeah, I think it
Yeah.
did. And then you go back and it never happened. But I think you're right. I don't know. It feels like, yeah, there's something.
So I feel like that was obviously fy'ra,
Yeah.
right? And you already made this super interesting point that maybe she was the lady down there, which I mean, if they do know her, seemingly that's where they know her from, right? Not that she
Mhm.
has to be that same lady, but like they probably know her from that time when their memories are messed up, and that's why they like kind of recognize her but don't really.
Right.
So I don't know. And this might be completely unrelated, but it is interesting that she's level 4, so higher, like 2 levels higher than them when she first is introduced. And now I guess,
I wonder if that was a typo though, or some mistake. Because at the end,
oh yeah, she
we
does
did mention this
roll.
in the recap. Yeah, Abria says, "Hey, you're all level 3," which I was like, "Well, crap, that ruins my theory on
Yeah, right. We're like,
them being higher level, and just being like wiped from it." But even she rolls, and there's this thing about
right.
she's rolling her hit die, and it falls. She like, I guess it goes out of her little bin or whatever, and she's
Oh
like, "Oh,
yeah.
does this still count?" And Abria's like, "I don't care what you do." Which Abria could be a little feisty with her players. She's like, "I'm not gonna." I think
Yeah.
maybe it's Dorian or Robbie who is like, do I? What's this? How's this work for like health? And she's like, you could take the average.
Oh yeah.
Because he's like teasing him. But my players, they roll or something like that. So the feistiness was funny, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, 4 episodes left. We're definitely we're kind of losting a little bit. Where like
Yeah.
every episode is adding more questions than answers, and that's not to imply we're heading to like some like ultimately unsatisfying ending. But I do wonder. It does make me wonder. Okay, in 4 episodes, what questions will we legitimately get answered? And what is being designed for maybe CR3 content?
Yeah. Uh Great question. I'm starting, I think there definitely could be implications for C3. Like I think that's clear. I mean, she's playing with the world, and so there might be ripple effects. But I think it's not just going to be a pure setup. Like I think there will be like a resolution. This feels like kind of her own whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like she would want to have her own ending as opposed to like, leaving it up for Matt or whoever to address later.
Yeah,
But
and I wonder if we'll get some sort of cliffhanger, almost like a seasonal cliffhanger, where episode 8 ends, and next year, hey, we're releasing another 8 episodes of this story. I mean, have they said yet if I know they said it's an 8? They said, hey, we're telling the story in 8 episodes, but have they made comments on like this is the end of that story, or because they can't tie up every plot thread in 4 episodes, right? I mean, I don't know. I guess it's 16 hours ideally of I
I
don't know.
mean, there will definitely still be questions no matter what, right? But I think that's just like how the medium works. Like you're not everything's not going to be answered, but I think that's okay. But I'm hopefully like these huge looming questions that we're talking about will be, at least I hope. But no, I don't
Mhm.
think they've mentioned anything about plans for the future other than that EXU is gonna be like its own thing. But the way they presented it so far is that like I imagine there will be like even a third DM, not Matt or Bria, maybe somebody else, and then maybe a few other new players, and this will be just like a recurring thing they do. That's my impression. But that it could easily be that they bring back the exact same people for a quote unquote season 2. Like that wouldn't surprise me either.
Or
They
maybe they
haven't
even
announced that or anything.
yeah, or maybe some of these quote villains that are getting introduced into the show, maybe they'll show up for someone else's party
Yeah.
later on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of villains, I'm really intrigued by the War Queen. I'm really, Liam had this awesome moment of his natural 20 on Darkfern,
Hmm.
and he gets beat up pretty bad. I misremembered the moment because you mentioned it was later on when they're about to get to the cart that Fern puts her hand on his face. I thought it was, they're healing Opal, and someone asks like, "How are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm pretty beat up," which he was. And Fern in that moment does it out of like a appreciation for regardless of when it was. I was like, yeah, I'm ready to ship this. This is a cool deal. I can take it.
Yeah, is that what that was?
So,
That's what I was reading into it. They were having a moment there, but I wasn't
I
sure.
don't know if it was romantic. I think it was definitely because I mean Orem realizes that Darkfern wants Fern and steps up as, which, what an awesome, like, the image of this moment of this halfling who's purely defined by bravery in this moment, stepping up with his shield in front of Fern. It was a cool scene. It was a cool moment for sure. And besides that, though, Opal, I mentioned this in the recap. Did she die? Did she get knocked unconscious? We know D&D rules. Someone gets to 0 health. They roll their death saving rolls, but they're not dead. They're just unconscious.
Yeah.
But I think Fern says, you died. And she's like, oh, I really did die, or something like that. Was that just RPing, like just flavor, or what's going on here?
I don't think she died. I think that was just kind of flavor. And maybe you remember even how we talked about in one episode, maybe episode 2, Fern revealed that like she's died a whole bunch of times. Like maybe Fern just doesn't really have a true understanding for like death versus like unconsciousness.
Okay, that makes sense.
But because I was wondering that same thing, but I think it was just, playing with the idea that like, Ted thought she might be dying because here she is sitting unconscious in a battle. Like she might be at death's door, might die at any moment. But then, even Liam, as Orem speaks up, he's like, I don't think you were dead. You were just unconscious.
Right.
So
right.
For my money, I think she wasn't actually, there's no like weirdness there where she like actually died or anything. I just think that was a flavor from Fern.
Well, speaking of Ted, were you surprised? I mean, we've talked a lot about Ted and like, who is Ted exactly? And even like, is there something malicious here of like someone like feigning as her sister to manipulate her?
Yeah.
We even talked about it being like her patron or something to that effect. Getting to Byrodin and learning that there is, or maybe was, a Ted and was actually her sister and left to follow her. I mean, that was for me, that was a huge moment.
Yeah, it's weird. There's a lot to unpack there, right? Because clearly there's this weird relationship that Opal and Ted had where she can communicate with her, she gives her powers. It's very strange, but Opal doesn't view it as strange. And in Opal's mind, through a few lines of dialogue that we've seen, she just thought Ted was still in Byrodin, just chilling. Like, but I guess she just thought they had some sort of cosmic connection that let them communicate. But we come to find out that Ted's not there. And Ted keeps making these comments about, like, I gave up everything to be able to protect you. And so, like, I don't know, it's just weird that Opal doesn't, like, that Opal, like, accepts this weirdness, but then also doesn't really know what happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, you'd think that, like, if she knew she got powers and could talk to her this way, that, like, something must have happened. She wouldn't just assume that she was still living her normal life over there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, for my money, it seems like some sort of deal with the devil was made, and perhaps Ted gave up her life, her physical existence, in order to like get this magic for Opal, and is like tied to either like literally Opal herself, or maybe she's like her essence is tied to that necklace or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's weird. It's just weird to me that Opal is so oblivious to aspects of this.
Yeah, that she wouldn't be like, hey, wait, how are you talking to me? Or
Yeah.
I wonder if the next scene we see that she's going to say, hey, Ted, where are you, by the way?
Yeah.
Like literally, where are you? Because it's definitely strange that she's oblivious to it, that she seems to be unaware of Ted's ability to affect her magical ability.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really make much sense. But it was surprising that Ted's a physical living creature at one point was. I think you're right. There's some deal with the devil made, which if that's true, how much bigger a moment then of their argument where Opal, I don't think this was mentioned in the recap, but Opal basically says, how much longer do I have to take care of you?
Mm-hmm.
Like to Ted, which is a bit ironic because it seems like Ted has given everything to take care of Opal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because especially the fact that people in the town knew Ted, right? Because part of me was wondering, like, maybe Ted has never had a physical existence, and just for whatever reason, Opal is like manipulated or confused or whatever. But clearly, she has, because people in the town know her. Ruby referenced her. Oh, I don't know.
Was it weird that her dad wasn't around?
It was kind of weird because
I'm surprised we didn't have like a dad reunion moment, because even the guard is like, oh, the person who never like writes her father or something like that. And I think he even wondered, like, is this guard her dad?
Yeah, she did. Yeah,
Um, so I was surprised we didn't get any kind of reunion there.
that's a good point. Because yeah, hmm. And I still feel, and we talked about this a lot more in our last episode, but there was that little reveal about how Opal's dad has been to the ruins of Kinara and came back naked and afraid, and we kind of weren't sure if that was just like a fun flavor moment that Opal was adding to like be inclusive in the conversation, or if that like literally is like a piece of her backstory that could potentially be like a clue or a hint to something bigger. But if the latter, maybe with whatever happened between Ted and Opal was all like snowball effect from something their father did, and maybe he's also gone, or I don't know. I really don't know. But yeah, I didn't even really think about that till you just said it. But it's super weird that he wasn't seen, or at the very least he wasn't mentioned. Like, hey, where's your dad? Or like she didn't even go look for him or anything.
Or her mom. Part of this is probably like you could only fit so much in the episode, but without Mephistoing, it does make you wonder how strange that she goes to her house. She can just freely walk into her house. She can go to her room and see her
Yeah,
sister's bed. And there's not like a parent like, hey, where's your sister, by the way?
yeah,
Or like, hey, great to see you. And it doesn't seem like they're like tragically dead because of the guard who says, oh, you never write your father. To me, it would
right.
seem like, I don't know. I don't say that about people whose dad's dead.
Yeah.
So
So
I don't
like
know.
that line implies he's there and around,
Yeah.
at least in a normal capacity. So yeah, I don't know. Strange.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot happening in this show, right? We got all the craziness surrounding Fern, and before we even get to Dark Fern, and then that opens up, and then we've got all this weirdness surrounding Opal. Is it all connected, or I don't know. I don't know.
It feels like they're because it definitely, you're right. I mean, it does feel like the story is like conflating more and more with each episode of like, oh, there's this, oh, there's that. Um, it does seem like I don't know if it'll all come together like in a neat and tidy way, but I do think some of the things are more related than first glance would seem. Um, it also, I do think these next 4 episodes are going to happen. I think a lot's going to happen, and they're going to move very quickly in terms of developments for the greater story, like the greater narrative. And part of that, I say that because of the ominous realization that fy'ra has that
Yeah.
this is like the last moment of comfort for their journey.
Right.
That is not a very positive outlook for the party in the next 4 episodes.
Right. Yeah. Who's she talking to?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think some people on Reddit were saying like they were looking at like Monk's abilities, being like, what is this ability? What is she doing exactly? And thinking maybe she had homebrewed a little bit of this.
Yeah, because I mean, not that I'm intimately familiar with monks, but there's a monk in campaign 2, so I've seen a lot of monk stuff, and there's nothing. They're not magical. Like they don't do magic. They're physical. So I was wondering that too. Like, what's going on there? So to me, though, the most simplest explanation is there's some sort of deity, right, or something like that at least. And so maybe the same person she's talking to is the same thing that is potentially teleporting her where she's needed, or I don't know. The
Do
whole
you think?
time. Go ahead.
I was to say, do you think her character's here to stay for the rest of the show?
I do think that, yeah. The way they've like been talking about it, and you know, I think she is like going to be in the rest of the episodes. It wasn't just like a one episode guest
Hmm.
stint. So why she wasn't in the first ones, maybe like a scheduling thing that they wrote creatively into the story, but and that's why we're having these weird summoning moments. Or maybe that was just always the plan to
Hmm.
just have somebody come in episode 4. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree. It seems like she's here to stay, which she's been great. I really have liked her in the show.
Yeah, it was so cool. I just didn't expect to be a guest star at all. So that caught me completely off guard, and I was super happy about it because campaign 2 just recently ended, and for the last year and a half of it, really, it's been affected by the pandemic and Corona, and one of the consequences of that was like no guest stars because they had to follow like safety protocols and stuff. So potential guest stars have been like completely removed from my mind. So I did not expect it at all, and
Yeah.
loved it because of that.
So what's going on with talking about By Roden? The pageant was awesome. We talked about the pageant in the recap and how amazing Liam was.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the statues of Vex and
Okay.
Vax. Because
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? Because my impression was this was like a random town by the road. It's a small town. So it kind of threw me. And I didn't understand where they're saying if Vax and Vex were from By Roden or like what do you have more information there?
Yeah. So Vax and Vex are from Byroden.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's
Wow, that's
that's their
cool.
hometown, and it was never really like that single line was basically most of the backstory we'd ever gotten on it. So I think Abria got to kind of do what she wanted with it. The only history we know is Thordak, the Cinder King, which we've spoken of a little bit in previous episodes. He's the one that caused the scar that the fire Ashari were dealing with, and he also is the one that caused the crater in Amon that has been referenced as well. He attacked that city a long time ago, like before even he did the scar in the crater I just mentioned. He attacked it like a long time ago, and that's part of what's mentioned in campaign 1 with Vax and Vex, and that's basically
Yeah,
all.
okay.
Is that this town, the town they're from, was attacked by Thordak, and I won't get into any other spoilers, but um, so I thought it was really cool that Abria decided to like go there and flesh it out and create like this culture there that's like very reminiscent of like southern Texas or just any place in the South really. And I think she said the three M's are like mining, militia, and merriment.
Merriment,
I want to say,
merriment. Yeah,
and so basically the quick history is that the town was attacked by Thordak at some point in the past, and they had to rebuild after that. And after something like traumatic like that happens, a town's going to make sure that they can protect itself. So that's why militia is one of their like three M's. Um, and also, and Abria kind of spoke a little bit about this on Twitter, and she was saying that the type of people that would stay and rebuild is going to be like a tight knit community, and that's why like kind of everyone knows each other there, and they put up the statue of Vax and Vex because it's like, look, people from Byrodin are strong, and we're a strong town, we're going to survive, we're going to evolve, and um, they she they rebuilt. They're strong, but they also know how to have a good time, and that's like where the merriment comes in. And they have these festivals and stuff. So I don't know,
lots of pie.
lots of pie, but yeah, I just thought it was cool to see it, and it's not something that for those of you that didn't watch campaign 1, it's not something that like was a thing. Like we never even went there, so it was cool just to see it fleshed out. And I spoke on this a little bit when you were having your bathroom break, but the moment with Orem with like Vax in the background, I don't think there was any like there's no actual connection there, but just from like a meta standpoint, I just love that moment that like here was, a player with his past character like kind of highlighting the moment. I was hoping so bad that somebody did some fan art of it, but I haven't seen any yet, so
Yeah, no, that's
hopefully
really cool.
somebody does.
So Vox Machina, are they basically like the Avengers of Exandria? Like, does everyone knows them? Everyone, and
Kinda.
then similarly, and for campaign 2, are the Mighty Nine also famous, but over in Wildmount?
I don't want to get too spoilery here. I would say that Vox Machina would be way more like the Avengers than the Mighty Nine would, but it's also been probably 40 years or so, I think, since their escapades. And this was the town where one of them was from, so clearly they're gonna like, you know,
Yeah,
have the statue and know about him and stuff. I would say in Taldore, most people probably know who Vox Machina is. Um, but I would say that's not really the same of the Mighty Nine. They weren't as famous, if I can put it
yeah,
that
okay,
way.
okay. So where do you think we're going next in this episode? I mean, or in this series? I mean, do you think next episode we're making it to Kinira?
think so, and I think that we can answer a lot of questions there. Because one, we're going there to get the translation to figure out what the hell that rune is. But also, I'm still team something's going on with Opal's dad. So I'm thinking we might find out more, and maybe that'll shed some light on what's going on with Opal and Ted. Because I don't know, I feel like it could all be connected, especially like if their dad went there and came back like messed up, that perhaps he is the one that even started this deal with the devil or
Mm,
something. And maybe just Opal or Ted had to pay for it or something. But yeah, I think we're going there, and I think we will hopefully, if not get answers, get some light shined on things we're very confused about right now.
mhm,
Um, and if that is what fy'ra recognized when Dariak said Inara, then perhaps we get some answers about her as well once
mhm.
she gets there, and if she does have some familiarity or connection to it.
What about the post-credit scene with like thinking about the language? This is the second one we've had for Opal's character, or excuse me, Ted, around Opal's character. And obviously Ted's having this moment of sort of realizing she's close to home. But that line, she feels the seed of potential of purpose. The seed begins to grow.
Yeah,
Is that an RP explanation for level 3? Or are there greater implications here?
I don't know. I was wondering that too because I thought it was interesting that it's another clue that like this really is her sister and not a potential patron tricking her or whatever
Mm,
because she feels close to home but she can't touch it, which again makes me think that she's not out there somewhere. Like Ted no longer has a body. Like Ted's entire existence is this spiritual thing that she has with Opal. So I don't know what I don't know what the seed of potential was. Like I was trying to think, was there a moment that happened? Like maybe like the brief reconciliation she had with her sister. Like maybe that's what she's talking about. Like maybe the fact that Opal has this mission, and so Ted's like, maybe I can do some good via this mission we're on. I really have no idea what that was referring to.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know either. It's just I feel like we are beating a dead horse here, but a lot of questions to answer for
Yeah,
sure. And hopefully it definitely feels like I said before, this back half of the series is going a lot's going to happen, I think. And I think we may be heading to some pretty epic moments.
I think so too. And one thing, real quick, I'm trying to find it to make sure I say the right thing. That seed of potential thing to growing reminded me of another moment. Sorry. But it was hopefully I'll find it here in a second. But it was with the elves from Singorn, and I think it was fy'ra communicating with her deity or whatever it was. Okay, sorry, I found it.
Yeah.
It says one mind of this group has a drop of thought like ink spreading in water into the rest of the group. So the party isn't going to Singorn. This isn't over yet. I don't think the two moments are related, but they reminded me of the other one, and I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
What
What
was
does
that
that
talking
mean?
about? Was it saying that like Mirada, like there's like a sense of distrust or like there's something greater going on here, and that idea just needs time to like spread, and then they're gonna like come after the party for some reason? Like this isn't over yet. I just didn't. To me, I'm interpreting that as the issue with these elves in the party, but maybe that's the wrong conclusion to make. Maybe this isn't over yet is referring to Dark Fern or something. I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting because of the descriptions around the elves. Abria says they're very focused as they're putting these crystals in, but deeply afraid, which
Yeah,
I think is interesting. And then I think about that line without the ink, which is such a great way to describe it. Without the ink, one mind of this group has put a drop of thought into the rest of the group. This isn't over yet. So for me, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. What's not over yet? This interaction with the Singorian elves, or the events that just transpired here. Is that what
true.
they're saying is not over yet?
I think that makes more sense.
And so then who is the person who's the faulty person, I guess? Is it, and is it related to the circlet? Part of me, as I was thinking, as that scene was happening, I was wondering, we're getting some, One Ring vibes a bit
Yeah.
with the circlet. And so I wonder what other similarities we're going to have in the sense of, is the circlet, we know that people, Opal, for example, when they were camping, the circlet seemed to kind of reach out to her. She had a dream of the
Yeah.
Spider Queen, it's kind of
True.
calling to her. And so I do kind of wonder, and especially Opal saying she's considering her options as she was looking
Yeah.
at the circlet. I mean, could we be heading to a moment where she realizes her sister's dead? It's her fault. And there's only one thing that can bring her sister back, the circlet,
Mm.
and heading towards her taking it and putting it on. I kind of wonder if the contamination, so to speak, of the group is one person being, they've kind of all been single-minded of, we need to take the circlet. We don't need to put it on, but we need to take it till someone, I guess, till it's the right time to give it up.
Yeah.
And I wonder if now one of them, maybe Opal, maybe Fern, is now thinking, I need the circlet, and is eventually going to try to take it.
Yeah. That Yeah, I mean, I could see it. I liked the One Ring comparison, that maybe it's like, kind of corrupting and like infiltrating into people to get it to like wear it or whatever, and maybe that's what Dark Fern was. Maybe, I don't know. But it was interesting that like his that Opal said that like she's considering her options, like staring at the circlet. Because like, we just had the whole moment with Fern. Like Opal wasn't even really connected to the circlet in any way. So like I just, what made her, especially after that horrific encounter, I wonder what made her think about wearing that. And maybe, unless it's just power, like, since she was just knocked unconscious, maybe she was like, you know, I can't let that happen again.
It seems like it has to be related to either Fern or Opal. Because let's think about the one person who's spreading into the others. It's probably not Orem, I'm thinking, because he seems to be the most holistically good,
Yeah, well,
brave
he can't even
character.
touch it, right? Him and Dorian
Right.
get sick.
Dariax is too stupid to, be affecting the party in some way. He's the feel good guy. Dorian would be the next one I would think as a possibility, but it seems like his story just is not really central to what's necessarily happening from what we've seen so far. And that's why I think it would have to be we'd have to be referring to either, it seems like fy'ra is getting insight from this deity about the party status, what's happening, and that in this moment she's being clued into, someone in your group is gradually losing their sense of cohesion with the rest of the group, and it's going to affect everyone else. They're becoming more singular minded. And so for me, that has to point to Fern or Opal.
Interesting. Yeah, man, I don't know.
I feel like we keep ending this with, I don't know.
We're honest.
Yeah. I think for those of you watching, if you have a theory or an idea, or this has been, I don't know how long this has been. But if you're still with us, if you have a theory, if you have a thought as to what's going on here with this very ominous line, we'd love to know what you think. And if you're right, you'll get some serious internet points, because we can say, hey, this random dude, this random person was right.
That's right.
So
you got that coming your way. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I would love to hear anyone's and everyone's theories. So if you've got it, definitely hit us up.
Mhm.
Were you going somewhere? Because I
I was
did
just
have.
gonna say, what else did you want to hit on?
I have one thing for sure. Uh, Speaking of Dorian, we get that moment with him and Dariax where Dariax is like, are you a carnival folk? Did I figure it out? And Dorian's I think it's clear that Dorian's messing with him in that moment,
Yeah.
saying like, yes, but then I'm wondering if there be some truth in those fibs where he gives that whole story about his dad being a famous juggler that, is now on the run because a king wants to kill him and Dorian has to hide because if anyone were to find out. That rings a little true to me. Like maybe the details are a little different, but like thus far we've known Dorian like won't reveal shit about his past. We've both speculated that, he's not who he says he is. And I don't know, I just something about that that moment made me think, okay, wait, is this true? It's just being kind of veneered with a lie.
Right.
What did you think in that moment?
Let me bring you back to a personal favorite of mine, Gladiator, where Joaquin Phoenix is playing Commodus, a really despicable character. He's talking to his sister's son, his nephew, and he's realized that his sister has double crossed him. And he's like reading like a bedtime story or like telling him a story or something. And the child's kind of like, this is weird. But he's like telling a story of a person who betrayed someone else and the whole time looking at his sister.
Yeah.
I think that's totally what's happening here. I think you're spot on that he's telling a story with like made up characters, but at its core, he's explaining what really happened to him and his family. Some of the details are probably made up, some of the things are exaggerated, or flat out not true, like being part of a carnival. But it does seem like it's sourced in truth. And I do think his comment on having a brother is definitely, he really does have a brother that he's squabbled with in some way. And I think he even says like his brother is larger than he is or something to that
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah, he did. So yeah, I just didn't know what to make of that. But to me, I felt that like that was true, and that I know we'd speculated that perhaps he comes from money, or perhaps even like a prestigious family. Um, so this makes me think maybe less of that, but that he's hiding because like maybe a powerful family is after him for some reason or something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good insight. And I just love that scene where again, it's peak D&D moment where someone says, "Where are you from?" And you're like, "Crap, I don't know this world well enough to like have a town." And so you're like, you could see him like on his iPad. It's like, "Give me a town." Someone like a town anywhere. Name a woman. He's just trying to like figure it out.
Yeah.
And then Fern, it's like 5 seconds that feels like 30 seconds as everyone's just staring. And then Fern goes, oh, you're a very bad liar.
Yes,
So yeah, that was just a great scene.
it really was. And ah, I hope he comes clean because I want to know. There's so many mysteries. That one I feel like is not going to be central to the whole story like some of these other ones might be, but I still want to
Right.
know.
Yeah, I did wonder when we got Opal's first after post-credit scene. I did wonder if we were going to get something like that for each character.
Ooh, that'd be
And
interesting.
now I'm thinking this is a story that revolves around Opal and Fern in some way. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, I don't want to say we've been hard on Opal because she definitely has had her Karen moments, but I went from like being kind of whelmed on Opal or like kind of like I don't know how I feel about this character to now I'm like okay I like everybody I love everybody the acting's great the characters are great. This episode really helped seal the deal for me in terms of I don't even know really what I'm saying
I know
other
you're
than just
saying
like
that like you like the character of Opal, where she kind of was coming off as a little bit abrasive in earlier episodes, and as we weren't sure if that was like in service of like a deeper RP character moment, or if Opal's just annoying. But like I think what's we've kind of it's been fleshed out is that like that was good acting, and like those were purposeful character choices that have like been making more sense as things have been fleshed
right
out here.
right
So I get what you're saying, and I agree.
nice
Um, yeah, but yeah, I agree that it seems like Fern, at least Fern, and I'll agree with you on Opal too, since I think the whole dad thing is connected. That they perhaps are a little bit more connected to the grand scheme of things than the other characters. Um, and I can't wait to find out. One last thing, or not, doesn't have to be the last if you have more, but there's one other thing I wanted to briefly touch on that I should have brought up when we were talking about Fern. But you mentioned something during the recap that I didn't even pick up on. That Dark Fern said that the letters were not from our parents, they're from grandma. I didn't even catch that happen in the episode. So to me, that's super interesting and makes me reconsider the whole context of the false memory Fern has about traveling as well. Like the grandma lied about these letters. Maybe the grandma is manipulating her memories about this. And I don't know. It seems like Fern has some in some form or fashion some part to play, and perhaps the grandma is trying to protect her from that,
Mm.
and Dark Fern and the matriarch of the Sealy Court or whatever are maybe trying to pull Fern back into that.
Yeah, and it's interesting the implications of like what exactly Dark Fern is, because if it's like a imaginative illusion
Mm-hmm.
to convince Fern to come through, then this could very well just be lies based on like her past.
Right.
But then again, it's information you would wonder how someone would know. If it really is her from the future, again, getting into time travel,
Yeah.
then yeah, it's a really cool development for her character of implying that I guess her parents left at some point, but still wrote. You know, it's like, oh yeah, your parents went to the farm, and oh, there's a new letter from them.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, dear Fern, we love you, mom and dad. You know, it's like I don't know. It does seem I'm a more of a fan of the latter, although it's a hot mess. You know, dealing with time travel, but thinking of the motivations of this grandma and you know, really the way she described getting to Iman of like her grandmother leading her. I think that's intentional language.
Mm-hmm.
And her grandmother definitely seems like the ends justify the means. That's kind of where I'm getting at with her. And so it
Yeah.
does make me wonder, although it seems like so far everything has been done to the protection of Fern, or maybe even her benefit or the benefit of other people. It does seem like we're heading to a moment of Fern realizing her grandmother isn't as pure in her memory as she, or the impression she has of her.
Mm. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and it seems like she's on some sort of mission as well, you know, saying I'm not ready to go back. I haven't accomplished it, what I need to yet. So like I just so many questions. So good
Yeah,
with
and you
time.
do wonder in future episodes, are they going to have the time and space for like Orem to say, "Hey, what you mentioned that? What is your mission? What are you
Mm-hmm.
doing here?" Or if it's still kind of like the fugue state that everyone seems to have had, and we don't really ever talk about it,
Yeah.
which is again weird. But I guess for the sake of the show, you're not gonna be like, "Hey, episode 1, hey, we're all confused. Let's get it all on the table. What
Right.
happened?"
Yeah.
So I
Because
get it from like a storytelling perspective.
they did mention that they were gonna, you know, they've seen Opal talk to Ted twice now, and they're like, "What are you doing?" They keep mentioning that they're gonna talk about that later, but they still haven't. So hopefully that.
Even when she brings it up to Gilmore, Gilmore says, "Let's table that. We'll get to that," but they
Yeah.
never do.
So
So
I don't think that's like an intentional. I think that's more just them probably like forgetting while they're playing type of thing. But
sure, yeah,
I hope it gets brought up so
yeah.
that we get some answers. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think that was most of the big things I had or wanted to dissect with you.
It's a long episode. This was a long episode,
Yeah, it was.
and for our listeners, thanks for tuning in. I don't know if like the episode should be as long as the Critical Role episodes themselves, but we're on our way.
Yeah,
And like I said, let us know in the comments what you think about the recap format. If you want it shorter, if you like it how it is, because we want to tailor it around what people get the most. The reason we do it is for the benefit of our viewers to know what happened in an episode. So
absolutely. Let us know. Hit us up in the comments. Hit us up on Twitter. We're over at PXLists, PXLISTS. Um, always down to clown and theorize with you there. So definitely give us a shout. And we just got our thumbnail to do as far as I'm concerned, unless you got anything else.
I love the thumbnail. Let's do it.
Okay, I don't have anything prepared.
It
I could
seems
try.
like we're either going pageant style or we're going dark fern style. So I'll
Oh,
let you choose the scene and then we can think of something from that.
let's go Dark Fern because that seems I don't even know what I'm gonna do, but it seems interesting.
Hmm.
Try to make like a scary, weird face or something.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. People could be like, he's weirded out and scared. And I'll do a little bit
We look like rats or like sewer creatures.
you guys are a bunch of idiots. We're not idiots. We're
Am I
doctors.
stupid? A little bit.
All right. Well, for our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. And thanks for just following us on this journey. We're excited for episode 5. We'll catch you later.
Pageant wave.
Yeah, good. That's what it should have been.
It should be it'll be next time.
Yeah, okay. All right, deuces.
Bye.